Today, my purpose is to find out more about your career and also what inspired you to go in this direction. So you teach quite a few courses at Amador that includes Honors Sophomore English, AP Literature, Social Justice, and African American Literature. What do you enjoy about teaching each course, and also how do you think they fit together for you?
I enjoy just the interaction with students, and that's what brought me to the profession in general. I just like the day-to-day interactions. Now, of course, I like the content. In other words, I read on my own, I do a lot of writing on my own, but to be able to share that with students is the most satisfying part of my day. And each one of those subjects obviously allows that kind of interaction. So as far as the focus for each one, they're all the same in that they're rooted in literature. So that's where I found my foundation because I come from an uneducated background. I have 5 siblings and my mom and dad did not attend college. So everything I know and all of my experiences are shaped by what I've read. So it's still exciting for me to share that experience with students who care on most days, but obviously during the school year, it ebbs and flows, but I still enjoy that interaction.
Who are some of your favorite authors?
In college, it's sort of embarrassing to say, but I can remember the first real book I read, and it was Leo Tolstoy's short story, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And I just remember being so moved by that because for the first time, I really started to consider my mortality. I know it's weird, but I was 20 years old and again, not from an educated background. So I really never really pondered the future. And I know it might be strange for someone like you who has ambitions and has goals, and you could foresee a 30-year-old Amy Wang, right? But it's weird, but I didn't really have that vision. So in reading that book, I was, I don't know, just it lit a fire in me. And in other words, just reminding me that yes, Darren Pagtakhan, one day you will die. I just thought I have to do something.
To make it meaningful.
Exactly. So that was the one book. And then to be honest, every book and every author I've experienced after has just been reverberations of that same feeling I experienced. So for example, I loved Ernest Hemingway, read a lot of him. I love Rainer Maria Rilke. I love the existentialists, James Baldwin more recently. What these writers all have in common, I think, is just an honest and true vision of who they are. I appreciate that because I think I haven't had that much experience with that feeling. And it feels really good when I do.
Yeah, and it feels like you kind of know that you are going for some purpose in life and that you're here because you are going to do something and not just existing by itself. And life is
Exactly.
meaningful and you need to find that meaning or else it's just going to be wasted.
Again, I just keep going back to that. That might sound strange from someone like you, but for me, I could literally, up to my first 20 years of life, there was nothing of that. It was simply, okay, get some work done, enjoy yourself, get a little more work done, put on a good appearance, be polite to people. And that's all I thought life was about, right?
And time just flows by.
Exactly. This facade of polite interactions, allow people to keep their appearances. I get to keep mine. So now I get to compare whatever I experience now to that. And I so much prefer this experience. And you call it meaning. I'm uncomfortable using that word because everyone, of course, the next question is, well, what is it? What is the meaning? There's no answer to that.
Yeah.
The meaning is I'm here and I'm thinking and we're interacting.
Guess we could call it living consciously.
Yes, that's a good term for that.
What inspired you to pursue a bachelor's degree in English?
It goes back to that experience I shared with you about Leo Tolstoy. I went into San Jose State as a business major. So I was sitting in line. I
Really?
know, I was
Wow.
passing all these accounting books because to me, in my head, again, in my immature vision, that's what adults look like. Adults, they did accounting, they
Make
partook
money.
in, yes, they made money, exactly, which is nothing wrong with that at all. But to me, I had nothing to balance that with. So from there, I had to take these intermediate courses such as English and writing. And that's when I got hooked. That's when I said, no, I have to pursue this. There's something meaningful here for me that I just can't let go. So that's what made me pursue that. I didn't take another class of accounting or business, and I immediately became an English major.
You completely dropped any course related to business.
Yeah, exactly. And in looking back at it, there was nothing to lose. So a lot of students your age might, that was a big move. But for me, there was no one really monitoring me. There was no expectations. So in a strange way, it was very liberating, right? I got to do as
Yeah,
I please.
I realized this pattern. Sometimes you just go into college and then you think you want something, and then you go into that. Then you just realize this is the entire opposite of what I really want. This is
That's
not at all what I want.
That's right. That's true. And it's important, I think, to keep listening to that. Whatever, I know it sounds esoteric to say, but you have to listen to that voice, because if you ignore it, it will eventually, I feel, go away. And I think that's there to serve you. It's there to serve you and to remind you what your purpose is. And it's so easy to say, oh, well, I'm doing this now. And I think each time you do that, it decreases in power until there's nothing left of you. And just like the term you used earlier, now at that point, you are now an unconscious being with all these gifts of consciousness that you're not using.
Yeah, it's just the feeling that something is not right and you cannot ignore it. You have to find something to fix it up, or you have to recognize it and give it attention.
That's right. That's, again, a beautiful way of saying it. Give it attention. There's many pleasant surprises when you do that, things that you never expected.
There's something very interesting. I read on your webpage that you have traveled to a bunch of different places, including India, Thailand, Philippines,
Mhm.
South Africa, Spain, and France. And I'm really, really impressed and amazed. What inspired you to go on this backpacking trip?
Well, what I found is when I started reading, it opened up a new world, right? So I saw myself
Yeah,
differently, and inherently the external world becomes different too. And again, back to what I was describing earlier, when I wasn't reading and I wasn't looking into the future, all that was around me was my immediate vision, like what I see in the room, who I see near me, and that was it. But when I started reading, it opened up a whole completely different universe. And in that universe included these countries and cultures that I never considered before. So I had a burning desire to visit these places that I read about, like Spain, especially with Hemingway writing so much about Spain and his experiences there. I just had to go. So I worked at Costco, I saved my money, and I bought these one-way tickets to these places and just stayed there as long as I could until my money ran out. And then I would go to another place and start all over. But again, it sounds risky now, but again, at the time, there was no expectations. My parents just trusted me. Oh, he has a degree, he knows what he's doing, when that was far from the truth. I was just seeing what was out there.
Where was your favorite destination?
Okay, I would say my favorite, in that it was the most challenging, was India. Boy, it was eye-opening. Before India, I've been to Europe, and I did that trip. But India, it's when I landed, I had this strange feeling that that safety net is gone. Right? I just had this sense that if I fell sick and just fell here on the sidewalk, I might make it to a hospital, but that would be it. So I know that sounds sort of dramatic, but I really got the sense that, wow, like the order that I'm used to was not present there. And I just want to be clear, it doesn't mean there was no order there. It just means the order I was familiar with, the Western order,
Yeah.
it was completely absent. So for example, even when you line up to buy a train ticket, right here, you stand in line. There, you just rush to the front. So it's just a whole bunch of people with their arms out. And I was like, what is this? So it's just things like that. So
Yeah.
again, it was my favorite because it was the most eye-opening.
It's uncomfortable, but in the same time it's liberating because it's completely different from what the little sphere that we live in every day.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Because I have this sinking suspicion that at the time I experienced that, I think I was 25 or 26 years old. I have a strange suspicion that the students I interact with in my class, such as yourself, you've experienced that already, right? You've had that experience maybe as a child or a young adolescent. Is that true?
What kind of feeling? Could
It
you?
just, yeah, the experience of being in a completely different environment and shaping yourself to fit that environment. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think
Yeah.
the most memorable incidents were when I first came to the United States to take some summer camps.
Yeah.
Maybe I was around fifth grade, and it's completely different. I've never really interacted with people who has a completely different culture before, and I was in the camp, and I don't have control over anything. And it's just weird people saying weird things, wearing weird clothes, and just watching weird movies, TV
Yeah.
shows, singing to weird songs. In the meantime, I felt quite nervous around these people and these things, but in the meantime, it's like I don't really have to. It's like giving me a chance to be someone who I really want, and I don't have to look at who was I before and what labels were put on me. I can just
Hmm.
start afresh, and that's a very good feeling.
Yes. And it's a good feeling because that is the feeling of growth. And I think the earlier you experience that feeling, the more you come to trust it. And by that, I mean, instead of meeting circumstances that you don't like and you sort of cower from, once
Mhm.
you've experienced a success with that, you are almost invigorated by those experiences, right? And again, even you doing this project, I think is a result of your anecdote, right? Of having experienced unfamiliar challenges and stepping up.
Actually wanted to start this project in my freshman year, but I never got the courage to. And one day my friend just asked me, Amy, would you like to do this something? And then I really just told her I wanted to do this yesterday. Let's start
Yeah,
it right now.
great. And it's funny because you used the word courage, but the way you described it is simply an opportunity. It's simply someone presented something to you that you never really thought could be possible, and all of a sudden you're doing it. And that's how life works. That's creation. It feels good.
And sometimes even just by being alone, not around anybody who will judge you or put any label on you, can have some alone time. That helps with seeing what you really want and not what
Absolutely.
everybody else wants you to be.
No, so true. And I think that also comes from having parents with expectations or from a culture that has expectations. Sometimes it's nice to step outside of that just to realize you have your own expectations for yourself and that they're equally valid.
Actually, this might be a little off topic, but my brother's making a lot of really cool Chinese lyric rap songs right now,
Mm.
and he's recording them and publishing them on a really cool platform where everybody can listen to it. I really enjoy listening because most of his songs are about finding his own identity and being by himself and figuring things out, and some really intimate but true feelings, very honest feelings. And I'm very happy for him that he's finding this identity.
It's inspirational because it allows you to find your identity, right? We need models. When people around us are doing that, are taking the risks and standing up, we want to do the same. We feel it's possible for us. How old is he?
He is 2 years younger than I.
Oh, okay, good. And I'm just curious, does he create his own beats?
He and his friend.
Oh,
His
okay,
friend creates the beats and he creates the lyric and he sings the songs. But they kind of collaborate.
that's
It's
cool.
also weird because in the beginning, all of my family members were kind of a little bit unwelcoming to the rap that he's making. And they think it's taking away his study time. They think it's not really the best because there's some swear words. But I'm glad he kept at it. He's not in there for any swear words. He's there. He's doing it because he loves it, and it's a way to express his emotions and feelings, and that youth angst.
And you said I think the operative word earlier, he's honest. And I think all good artists at root, they have that in common. They're just honestly expressing something about themselves. Sometimes it requires a swear word. Yeah.
That's true. Because sometimes if you're not doing that, it also kind of feels like you're faking it.
And I know this sounds cynical, but I think the adult world is more aligned with that, with faking it. You know, we fake it, we allow our adult friends to fake it. And the unwritten contract is that we won't tell on you. You don't tell on me, I won't tell on you. We're sort of faking it. But you're right. That's why we need artists like your cousin and you know, people who just by their mere presence can show us something more authentic.
I realize sometimes in the workplace you just have to, oh, that's great, that's awesome, that's amazing. Oh yeah, that's what I want, but that's not at all what you want. You don't like
Yeah,
it at all.
no, so true. I know.
And also when my auntie is talking to somebody at work on her phone, she's like, yeah, yeah, good, good, great, that's right, right. So then and then she hangs up and she's like,
I know. It's easy to be that way. So I can't criticize that behavior. But at the same time, I think it's our job to notice that and do our best to just not be that way. Just based on what we said earlier, that this, because that will soon become who you are. And that, I think that's a trap.
Sometimes it's very helpful and very necessary to have that fake facade at work. Like you just have to conform to some standards. You just have to, yeah, good. But then it's important to have your own life behind aside from that, I think.
That's right.
Not get consumed up in that.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And when I was younger, I felt you had to choose, right? And I'm not so sure you have to choose anymore, but I do think one of the sides requires more nurturing and more attention. And that's the side of authenticity, right? Because that requires practice. The fake side doesn't require any practice. It comes so naturally because we've been doing it our whole life. We know how to please others. We know how to say the right things.
This just things that you bring up, this resonates with me a lot. And I just remember in my 8th grade, I was exploring the concept of self-consciousness for a long time. And I read a lot of articles. I wrote a bunch of essays on it. And it just captured me because it is a good thing to be self-conscious. You know where you are, you notice every detail of what you're doing and saying. But in the meantime, it feels kind of fake because you're restraining yourself from doing things naturally. And
exactly,
it ties into what you're saying. Being able to let down that self-consciousness sometimes and just do whatever. Just do what I want to do not what other people want to see is very liberating. That's what we should follow for this life.
I so agree, Amy. And it's the way you articulate it is so beautiful, but it's so true, right? I do think that's the only path. Otherwise, you have this self-consciousness, which is the greatest gift we have, but it becomes a great burden when it doesn't serve you for all the reasons you described.
Returning to the English major, I have some questions. What are some skills required for this major?
Well, I don't know if it's skills, but a quality that's required, I would definitely say, is curiosity, right? The idea that you would want to read about experiences that are not your own, it implies that you're curious. There's something out there that you need. So I would say that's one quality that English majors tend to share is curiosity. And with curiosity, this idea of thinking, of seeing things as they are and knowing they could be different, and reading about authors and writers who write about those experiences, right? Who bring things to light that are always under the surface, not necessarily seen or spoken about, but we all know are there. Those are the brave people who bring those to light. And I think that another quality I already said is courage. It's a great deal of courage to do that. And we're naturally inspired when we see people do that.
Along this topic, from seeing from another perspective, have you ever learned another language?
I was born in the Philippines and my father speaks Tagalog, but unfortunately I never picked it up. I never learned it. I know it sounds strange, but at the time my mom told me she thought it would confuse me as a kid. But now we know clearly that the more languages you have as a child, the better, right? Your brain is just, it's built for language. It wants to learn languages. So unfortunately, I didn't learn a native tongue, but in high school and college, I did take Spanish. And in my travels, I was able to use it a bit more than I thought I could. But obviously, it's completely gone now.
I find languages very cool. Right now, I'm teaching myself German and French. And it's all very interesting, especially since I have some friends who I can practice this language with. And it also expands the way I understand things because the linguistics and the etymology, they're all interconnected. And it helps me to understand a lot of the emotions or the thinkings behind different phrases and why people phrase it this way. or
Yeah,
describe the scene this way, how people see things.
it seems accurate. This idea that every culture has a specific way of expressing the same emotion, and it matters. Those slight differences matter. And that's why I'm also interested in word etymology, like you brought up, because it really shows at root where words come from and how those have evolved.
Last year in my AP language class, we learned a lot of Latin roots and stems, and we have to remember them. Find them really helpful.
Yeah, that's the foundation of English, right? So
Yeah.
if you know those, you'll be fine for English.
Mr. Pagtakhan, what are some challenges that come with studying in the English major?
Well, I find the major in itself to be a bit subversive, which means it's always countercultural. Like reading and thinking, it tends to go against the cultural norms for the reasons we described earlier, right? So I think that's one main challenge. The more you do it, strangely enough, the more it puts you outside the cultural bubble, right? Which makes you vulnerable, but at the same time, like you said earlier, it's liberating, right? It's what makes you who you are.
I never thought about it this way, but it's so
Yeah,
true.
that's right. And so do you see the challenge in being a high school teacher? Because a high school teacher, one can argue, your goal is to put the student in the cultural bubble, to give them the tools to thrive in the culture. But you see why some students are turned off by English? Because I think they may not be able to articulate this, but English takes you out of the cultural bubble
Mm.
and forces you to fend for yourself.
It's like you're in this big world, not
That's
just
right.
in the classroom.
Exactly. That's right. And for some students, it's so attractive. Like for me, it was, if I walked away from it, I knew I would pay for that.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest challenge. The deeper you go into it, the more you'll find yourself outside of the protective cultural bubble.
Here is an interesting question that I prepared. What is one flaw? So I know you, in your course, you emphasize simplicity in writing and also the cogentness that like you need to convey something in the simplest manner, but the most efficient manner possible. Why do you think this makes writing better?
So the reason why I think it makes writing better is because I feel most people use language to hide. So in using language to hide, what I find, the more words you use, to me, the more you're revealing something. And so the more you think and the more you understand a concept, strangely enough, the better you're able to articulate it, which oftentimes means simpler, shorter, more succinct. And I find students who are able to do that, what it indicates is that they really know. And that I think what's frustrating for students is that they feel a sophisticated, an academic way of writing, and they feel, oh, the teachers will be impressed because look what I can do. But to me, I just see it as a conscious or unconscious way to be evasive and to hide. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that when we interact with people, if you really pay attention, we're using language to hide ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When I think language at its optimal it should be to express. So especially when it comes to writing, I can always tell the difference between a student who's hiding and who's trying to dress up themselves with language, and a student who's really thought and reflected and is doing their best to articulate that very difficult concept. So that's why I trust the shorter, simpler sentences, because I think they're more honest. There's more there.
In the beginning, I was found it quite counterintuitive because you always wanted topic sentences to be in the structure of A because of B, and I find that so simple and a little bit like a dumb.
Yeah, you're not the only one that's true. It does feel that way.
But it makes sense totally.
I think so.
What is one flaw in writing that could actually enhance your storytelling and be a strength in the right context?
So just to make sure I understand the question, so what is a flaw in writing that can actually enhance your writing? Ah, that's interesting.
A commonly regarded flaw.
So I don't know if this answers your question, Amy, but I would put my answer in the context of editing. In other words, all writing that you put down is simply clay. And the more you work with it, the more you whittle it down, the more something beautiful appears. And by beautiful, it just means an articulated idea. So the flaw in writing, at first you have to get something down on paper. And this is what's hard to do in the academic school year because you guys have 5 other classes and you're so busy and I only see you for 1 hour. So I don't think students really learn the art of editing because would you agree? The first thing you put down on paper and you got your 3 pages, that's typically what gets turned in. And of course you might change a word here and there. You might change punctuation, but your first draft from what I've seen is typically not that different than your final draft. So back to your question, the flaw of writing is to put something down on paper and think that's the final product, right? To treat it as if, okay, I have to write a 3-page essay. Here are 3 pages. I'm done, right?
Yeah.
When I think the real essence is taking that and then whittling it down to something better articulated and therefore better thought out, more authentic.
I actually experienced this last year because we had most of our essays were in class essays and we just had to write by the clock and just by the minute and the second. I actually feel like it helped with me expressing my ideas because whatever is and I have a clear structure, I have an outline laid out obviously, but however way that idea came to my mind, I just write it down very simply and it all made sense and I didn't see a need to correct or like edit any of those things in it. And it so in the meantime I'll just tell myself not to overthink it and try to phrase it in a very complicated way or like a very sophisticated way, very expressive. It guides the reader, so here's this and here's that and now we're looking at this and that's because of that, and
Yeah.
that way it's very helpful practice.
It is, but that experience is I wouldn't say it's the opposite of the editing process, but to me it's the first step. In other words, having a pattern, knowing how to organize a paper and being able to do it in a time fashion definitely is a skill to develop. But I still feel that having done that, there's when you go back to it, I think there's always something to work on, always something to whittle down to make it more articulated. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the part that is not taught at all because for the reasons you said, but I think it's also the most essential part.
Here's another interesting question. What kind or genre of a magazine would you start if you had the chance to do so?
Let's see. If I could start a magazine,
Any magazine.
any magazine, and money wouldn't be an issue and
No.
profits, okay. It would be a literary magazine, it would be creative work, it would be unpublished authors, which implies maybe younger writers, poetry, songs, lyrics, things like that. Because I
Yeah.
think it's important to have that to catapult you and to get an audience. And again, it reminds me of the story you were telling me about your cousin. You know, your cousin, it feels good when you're younger, when you express yourself, to have an audience, to have people out there responding to it. So I think a magazine that does that would be helpful.
It's so nice that nowadays we have social media and online and it's cheap to just start something and you can just have people submit their works and really just express their ideas and put it out there.
No, yeah, that's so true. There used to be a middleman. There used to be someone you had to please in order to get your work published. But you're right, with social media now, that's from you, boom, to the public. I'm not familiar with that, right? I missed that generation, but I know that that's very true for you, right?
And people also like to read it because it's raw and it's true and it's honest. And this connection, like if I read somebody putting some kind of feeling in a very sincere way, I would have a strong connection to that. And I feel like that's very admirable.